On an October evening in 1985, as the sun melted into the horizon and the Mediterranean Sea glowed orange, the Italian cruise ship Achille Lauro sailed peacefully toward the Egyptian coast. On board, more than 700 passengers enjoyed music, dinner, and the soft ocean breeze. It was supposed to be a dream vacation, a calm escape into the heart of the Mediterranean. But hidden among the tourists were four men who smiled politely, blended into the crowds, and carried a secret that would soon turn the ship into a floating hostage crisis. These men were members of the Palestine Liberation Front, and they had come aboard with a mission that no one could have imagined. That night, as passengers settled into their cabins and the ship drifted gently across the waves, the four men retrieved concealed weapons and prepared to take control. What began as a quiet voyage would soon become a global political storm. Just after dinner, the peaceful air shattered with the echo of gunfire. Screams filled the hallways as the hijackers stormed the decks, shouting commands and waving rifles. Confusion spread like wildfire. Some passengers hid under tables, others froze in fear, trying to understand what was happening. The hijackers quickly seized control of the ship and ordered everyone to gather in central areas. Within minutes, the Achille Lauro was no longer a vacation cruise. It was a prison drifting in open water. Captain Gerardo de Rosa, under the threat of death, was forced to obey the hijackers' orders. They declared that they were taking the ship in the name of Palestine and demanded the release of 50 Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. They warned that if anyone resisted, they would start killing hostages. Panic settled like a heavy fog over the passengers. Many were elderly, confused, and terrified. Parents tried to comfort their children as armed men stalked the corridors. The hijackers wanted the world's attention, and they intended to get it. As hours passed, the hijackers grew increasingly impatient. They ordered passengers to hand over passports so they could identify American and Israeli citizens. Some people tried to hide their nationalities, whispering prayers that the hijackers wouldn't notice. But among the passengers was a 69-year-old American named Leon Klinghoffer, a man confined to a wheelchair because of a stroke. He was traveling with his wife on what was supposed to be a peaceful holiday. As the hijackers sorted through the passports, Klinghoffer's nationality made him a target. Tension on the ship escalated. Every move, every sound, every breath felt dangerous. The hijackers threatened to kill a passenger every 15 minutes if their demands were not met. No one knew whether they were bluffing or prepared to carry out their threats. Meanwhile, the outside world slowly learned what was unfolding. Intelligence agencies scrambled for details. Egyptian, American, Italian, and Israeli officials launched emergency meetings, each trying to understand the hijackers' motives. In Washington, President Ronald Reagan was briefed on the crisis. The United States had a firm anti-terrorism stance, and the idea of Americans being held hostage on a cruise ship caused alarm at the highest levels. But no one yet knew the tragedy that was already taking shape inside the ship. As negotiations dragged on and frustration built, the hijackers made a devastating decision. In a moment of rage and desperation, they seized Leon Klinghoffer from his wheelchair. Despite his disability, despite his age, despite his helplessness, they shot him in the head and chest. Then, in a brutal act that horrified the world, they ordered crew members to throw his body and wheelchair overboard. His wife, Marilyn, was told he had been moved, unaware that he had been murdered. The ocean waves swallowed the truth while the ship continued its tense journey. This killing turned the hijacking from a political act into a global outrage. It marked the Achille Lauro as a symbol of cruelty and terrorism. After the murder, the hijackers demanded the ship sail to Syria, believing it would offer them refuge. But Syrian authorities refused to let the ship dock, not wanting to be pulled into the crisis. This rejection pushed the hijackers into a corner. They began to panic. They feared international forces would soon intervene. Their demands grew more chaotic. They wanted safe passage, fuel, and guarantees that no military forces would arrest them. Eventually, negotiations with Egypt reopened, and the hijackers agreed to leave the ship in exchange for promises of safe travel out of the region. Passengers clung to hope as the ordeal neared its end. Many had spent more than 2 days sitting on floors, dehydrated, exhausted, and emotionally broken. When the ship finally reached Port Said, Egypt struck a deal. The hijackers would leave the Achille Lauro and board an Egyptian commercial aircraft that would fly them to Tunisia. The passengers and crew, though shaken, were finally freed. But the story was far from over. What happened next would become one of the most dramatic and daring interception missions in U.S. history. American intelligence tracked the aircraft the moment it lifted off. President Reagan authorized a bold and unprecedented move. U.S. Navy fighter jets intercepted the plane midair over the Mediterranean, forcing it to change course. In a moment that stunned the world, the aircraft was compelled to land at a NATO base in Sicily. Once the plane touched down, Italian and American forces surrounded it. This triggered a tense diplomatic confrontation between the Allies. The United States wanted immediate custody of the hijackers and especially their leader, Abu Abbas, whom U.S. intelligence believed had orchestrated the attack. Italy insisted the hijackers had landed on Italian soil and therefore fell under Italian jurisdiction. Heated arguments erupted on the tarmac as soldiers and officials from both nations stood face to face in a high-stakes standoff. In the end, Italy arrested the hijackers, but, under political pressure and unclear international law, allowed Abu Abbas to leave the country, an outcome that deeply angered the United States and sparked controversy for years. Meanwhile, the passengers of the Achille Lauro returned home, each carrying memories that would haunt them. Many spoke of the fear, the uncertainty, and the horrifying moment they realized one of their fellow travelers had been murdered. The family of Leon Klinghoffer became the emotional center of the tragedy. His daughters demanded justice, while his story became a symbol of innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of political conflict. The hijackers were eventually tried in Italy. Some received lengthy prison sentences, while others were later released or escaped during political upheavals in the Middle East. None of these outcomes restored what had been taken, the life of an innocent man and the sense of safety for travelers around the world. The incident exposed weaknesses in international security, prompting new laws governing maritime terrorism. It forced nations to confront the reality that terrorism could strike anywhere, even on a peaceful cruise ship in the middle of the sea. The Achille Lauro hijacking left a permanent mark on history. It revealed the complexities of global politics, the tensions between nations, and the human cost of ideological conflict. It became a turning point in how governments responded to hostage crises. But beyond political lessons and international disputes, the story remains deeply human. It is the story of terrified passengers clinging to hope, of a captain forced to navigate impossible choices, and of a man who lost his life simply because of where he came from. Decades later, the name Achille Lauro still echoes as a reminder of the fragility of peace and the unpredictable nature of terrorism. And maybe the most important lesson is one that history repeats again and again. When politics pushes humanity aside, innocent people pay the price. The tragedy of the Achille Lauro stands as a warning that in moments of violence, it is always the ordinary people, travelers, families, the elderly, the vulnerable, who suffer first and suffer most. As long as this story is remembered, it urges the world never to forget the cost of conflict and the value of every human life.